For this model's haircut, we're going to do a two-finger low fade, which is going to make the longer top stand out. We're going to do a scissor over finger technique on top. We're going to take small, tiny sections, so the top is going to be very even. Everybody's head shape is different. This gentleman's head shape, the widest part of his head happens to be lower. Some people, the widest part is up higher past the temples. So when you're dealing with the widest part being lower, you shouldn't take the fade or the taper past the round of the head because it takes the haircut out of proportion. So to keep the haircut in proper proportion, we want to make sure we do a 1 or a 2 finger fade for this head shape. Then we're going to texturize the top, we're going to mess it up and spike the front up, and we should be in really good shape. Starting on the top, I'm going to pull the front up or the bangs up at 90 degrees. I want the bangs to be the longest portion of the haircut. And I'm going to use a scissor over finger technique, and I'm not going to cut past my center knuckle. I'm going to take very small sections. That way the hair is going to be cut very evenly. If your sections are too wide, you're going to miss hair. And the top is going to be uneven. So we want to get a nice center section. Never want to cut past your center knuckle. I like to use a 6.5 to a 7-inch scissor for cutting over my fingers. If I'm using a scissor over comb technique, I like to use a 7.5 to an 8.5 shear. The shorter shear is easier to control when you're cutting over your finger. The longer shear is much more accurate. You can cover more ground when you're cutting over your comb. So I want to make sure at all times when I'm cutting the top, my fingers are parallel to the floor. This is a square-shaped haircut, so I want to make sure we leave weight in the corners to mess up and to go forward. I don't want to round this to the shape of his head. So now I'm going to take another section to the left of the center. I'm just cutting with the front tip of the scissor or the front third. I generally make 2 to 3 cuts, but never past the second knuckle. Once you cut past the second knuckle, you lose control of your scissor, and you're most likely going to wind up cutting yourself. Now for the last section on the left side, it's very awkward to reach all the way across. So what I do is I come around the front, I drop my left elbow, and pick the hair up from the front. So I'm using a traveling guide, so I always have my previous guide in my finger. So when I'm on the top, after I cut my center guide, if you think about it, I have my center guide, and then when I'm working on either side, I have a center guide and a traveling guide. So I'm always working with 2 guides, so I never get lost on the haircut. And what's really going to make this haircut stand out is leaving that front longer, so I didn't cut much of the front. So before I move on, I'm going to take a pair of texturizing shears, and I'm going to do the same thing and cut over my fingers and take some of that thickness out. So it's going to take some of the thickness out, and it's going to add texture. It's going to add life to the haircut, and it's also going to be much easier for the model to style his hair. And if you look really closely, when you pick up the hair, I'm not going in just any which way. Everything I do is with a system, and when you pick up the hair, you can tell it's even. So on the left-hand side, what you want to do is drop your elbow, and then I'm going to texturize it from this side when I'm working over my fingers, so I'm not at an awkward angle, just like when I was using the straight shear. It's very difficult to stand on the right and reach all the way across the head. It's very awkward. And then in the back, if you like, tilt your customer's head down, you can come through and you can do a little scissor over comb technique with your blending shear. Usually the thickest portion of the hair is right around the parietal ridge and this area right in here. So we want to make sure that we texturize that enough so he can get the style that he wants, so it'll stand up in front. So after cutting the top, I want to start working in my round of the head section here. I'm going to use a little bit of a scissor over comb technique. And as I said before, with scissor over comb, I like to use an 8-inch shear so I can cover more ground. So I'm going to use a large flat top comb, a light colored comb on dark hair. I like a swivel thumb when I'm using scissor over comb. The reason why I like the swivel thumb is for years, a straight thumb was always rubbing on the side of my thumb and I would get sore because I do so much scissor over comb. Just a slight turn with the thumb puts the pressure on the back of my thumb and then I'm not sore anymore. So that's the reason why I like to use a swivel thumb. So I'm going to take an imaginary line straight up in the air. I'm using the front third of the scissor. And this is creating my guide for when I go in with my clipper blade. As I said before, this is a square-shaped haircut, so you want to make sure when you're picking the hair up on top, your fingers are parallel to the floor. When I'm picking the hair up on the side, the comb is parallel to the side of the head. Now I want to dip down a little bit in the back. I want to make sure I can see the back here wants to stick up if we cut it too short, so I don't want to cut it too short. People ask me all the time about cowlicks, and my standard answer is it's only a cowlick if you cut it too short. Now when you're holding the comb, you want to hold it with your thumb on the bottom, your pointer finger, and your middle finger on top, so you can just, without turning your wrist. If you hold it like this, your shoulder's at a very awkward angle and you wind up flipping the hair and you're not going to cut it evenly. And instead of angling the comb out, you want to angle it in and it picks up the hair and you can cut the hair right along the base of the comb. Much easier. Okay, so we're going to blend that into the top, not by rounding it into the top, but we're taking an imaginary line straight up in the air, and we're going to do the same thing with the clippers. Okay, so this completes the scissor portion of the haircut. Now we're going to move on to the clippers. I'm going to start out with my lightweight detachable blade clipper. I'm going to use my largest blade, which is a 3 3/4 blade. It cuts the hair to 1/2 inch in length. I can see my guide right in through there. That's where I left off with my scissor over comb cutting. So I want to cut to, but not into that guide. So I want to take an imaginary line straight up in the air just below that area. You want to work real slow with your clipper. This way you're going to avoid leaving a heavy weight line that you're going to have to blend out. And then the other rule of thumb is, if you can see where his bangs are, you never want the fade higher than the bangs. It'll throw off the whole haircut. The whole haircut will be out of balance. So we're going to do this all the way around. You don't have to take a large section of hair because we're going to come back with 2 shorter blades after this. So we don't have to keep cutting the same spot over and over. I really like the metal blades. They go through the hair a lot easier. And they cut as you're pulling away. And if you see the direction I'm cutting the hair, his hair is growing straight forward. So I'm taking the clipper at a 45-degree angle, which is basically parallel to the side of his head, because where his head rounds in, I'm keeping the clipper straight this way. So only the first 6 or 7 teeth are cutting. So that way we're not cutting into our guide. So after I finish with that, I'm going to take the next blade size down, which in the metal blade system is a 3 1/2. Cuts the hair to 3/8 of an inch in length. And I'm going to stay about a 1/2 inch below where I left off. And I'm going to start to use the scooping motion. So each blade down blends into the next blade. If you create a bunch of weight lines or lines of demarcation, you're going to spend a lot of time blending them out. It's going to make life real difficult on you, especially when you're dealing with dark colored hair on lighter colored skin. Every little bit shows. So the chair spins. I like to stand in one place and just spin the chair. Okay, now the next blade I'm going to use is a 1.5 blade. I'm going to skip a blade. I'm going to skip my 2 blade, which is 1/4 inch. I'm going to go straight to my 1.5 blade, which is 1/8 inch. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to tilt my blade up. And by tilting my blade up, it's going to make it longer, and it's actually going to make it the same length as a 2 blade. So I'm going to be able to do 2 or 3 steps in one. So I'm going down to, this would be a 2 blade. Then I go down to say what it would be a 1.5 blade, 1/8 inch. And then as I'm doing that, I'm taking the tip of the blade and running it over the comb a couple times and blending the sides and the back to the top. So one of the things that I teach that I'm really passionate about is cutting with efficiency. Efficiency doesn't mean speed. I actually work slower than most people. My hand speed is slower. Everything I do is slower, but I'm done with a haircut faster because everything I do, I only do it once. And like this step in particular here, I'm doing 3 steps at one time. So 2 blade, 1.5 blade, and a little bit of blending all at the same time. So once you get to know your tools, you can save a lot of time. You're going to be a lot more efficient, and in the long run, you're going to make a lot more money. So just continue to work our way back around. Keep spinning that chair. And then as you're spinning the chair, ideally, you're going to have a mirror that you're going to be working with. So as you're spinning the chair, you know, every 30 or 60 seconds, you want to take a peek in the mirror and make sure that the haircut is coming out the way you want it to. Okay, so we're going to follow this all the way through to the front. Now this side, if you remember from earlier, grows straight forward. So we're going to have to do the same thing with our comb. We're going to have to come against the grain of the hair to pick it up. Just using the tip of the blade to blend the sides and the back to the top. I'm going to use my underhand grip because my shoulder's starting to get sore, which tells me that my body is out of position, so I have to change the grip of my tool. Okay, and now we have a nice blend, and we're going to move on to our semi-finish with our adjustable clipper. For the semi-finish, I'm going to be using a adjustable clipper. Adjustable clipper meaning the lever opens and closes. All the way closed is the shortest setting, all the way open is the longest setting, and I'm going to be using a white comb, so I have the contrast between the hair and the comb. So I'm going to open the clipper up all the way, and I'm going to tilt it up just a little bit and use a scooping motion. And I'm going to stay on a little bit of a diagonal. Then I'm going to close it down halfway, and I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do that around the ears. Now I'm going to open it back up and use that scooping or flicking motion just over the ears. You don't want to go in too high because you're going to go up too high into where we already were. and you're going to cut a hole into that longer blade. Now we're going to tilt the head to the side. I'm going to hold the clipper at a 45-degree angle. I'm going to start tapering the neckline using the scooping motion. Okay, we're going to bend the head straight down, and we're going to use a scooping motion right at the hairline. I like to balance the clipper on my middle finger, so I have a lot of contact with the clipper. I'm more comfortable. Some people are okay just in one hand, holding it with an overhand grip, or holding it like this. I find it much easier to balance on my middle finger of my opposite hand. I'm going to close it halfway down and not go as high. I'm going to close it all the way down and not go as high. Okay, and now pretty much our taper's there. When we come back with the trimmer, all we're going to do is shave up and clean the fuzz off the back of the neck. Now I'm working on the taper on the opposite side. Now if you can see what I'm doing, I'm just tilting the blade up and I'm just kind of grazing it over the hair. I'm just fading it out using a different angles. You want to experiment with different things. Because this particular model's hair, he has all different densities of hair. It's the thickest around the round of the head. It's the thinnest around the ears. So if we taper it in too close, he's going to wind up with this big white strip or white arc around his ears, and that's not going to look right. So now back to the sideburns. I'm going to open it back up all the way, tilt the clipper up. Now I'm going to close it halfway in between. Okay, and just like that, we're done with the semi-finish. And the reason why it was easy is because we worked our way down with the longest to the shortest blades on our larger clipper. So one of the very important things is to always know which tools you use for which job. So from here on out, we're going to just take our trimmer and we're just going to edge off the sideburns. We're going to pull the ear down. I don't really see any hair there, so I'm not going to make an arc around the ear. There's already one there for the trimmer. So we're going to line off a sideburn. We're going to line off the outline or design line on the back of the neck and clean behind the ear, and then clean up the fuzz on the back of the neck. When trimming the sideburns, you want to make sure that the customer's chin is perfectly parallel to the floor. If they're leaning down or looking up in the air, you're going to wind up with a tilted sideburn. So number one, before you do anything with the sideburns, always make sure that their jaw and their chin is completely parallel to the floor, and your clipper blade is parallel to the floor. So you make your line and then you shave up to it. As we said before, we're okay there. I see a little bit of fuzz on the back of his ear. We'll take care of that. I'm going to bend the head to the side, okay? And I just want to line up in my mind, get a picture there where I want to have it. I don't want to cut in. I want to leave it right on the natural hairline. You can see how much hair grows on his neck. So if you cut in too far, within 3 days, it's going to look like he needs a haircut. So it's going to do two things. It's going to extend the life of his haircut a little bit, and it's also going to look more natural. So we just make our line, and then we shave to it. This way the clipper works the way it was meant to work. The stationary blade picks up the hair, the cutting blade moves back and forth and cuts it. Once you turn that clipper around this way, the cutting blade is too close to the skin and you wind up with razor marks and sometimes even little nicks or abrasions. Okay, so we're stretching that skin. You can see I'm pulling it down with my finger. Now I'm going to tilt the head to the opposite side, make my line, shave to it. Again, the clipper's working properly. The hair is feeding into the stationary blade. The cutting blade is moving back and forth and cutting it. We have a nice natural tapered outline, and the clippers did all the work. Okay, we're going to pull the ear down just to check. It looks pretty good to me. I don't see any hair there. Make sure the chin is parallel to the floor, and we line off the other sideburn. So now, very efficiently, we worked through a very difficult haircut. Using our tools and the proper technique, it was relatively easy, and now we're ready to move on to the style. For the style, we're not going to do anything complicated. We talked to the model ahead of time. He likes the dry look, so we're going to use a dry paste with a good hold. We're going to use a good amount. You want to rub it through your hands really good so it's not, so it doesn't go on clumpy. So I just start by getting it through there, pushing it back, pushing it forward. You want to get it right down to the roots. And then the more messy the top is, the more it makes that really nice smooth taper on the sides, that low taper stand out. So we'll get it going forward. We'll push it up in the front. It kind of goes to the side a little bit on its own, so we don't want to fight with it. Okay, and then now we're going to give you the 360-degree view so you can see the contrast between the nice longer top with the real tight low fade.